The pitching options for today in daily fantasy baseball are better in the sense that there are more guys are like legitimate big leaguers, guys you'd want to use on a typical slate for DFS. The problem is that those quote unquote legitimate options are all guys who have some sort of big red flag. And it's a wide range of red flags too, whether it be pitch counts, effectiveness, arm fatigue. Like we got a long list of things that are ailing these guys and prevent them from being one clear-cut top option for today in DFS. So our job today is to navigate those red flags, navigate those downsides, and decide which guys are best option for DFS and how can we pivot and take advantage of what could be a pretty volatile slate. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberfire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberfire.com, here to break down Tuesday's 9-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 for tonight over on FanDuel.com. There is some weather to note for today over in Anaheim for the Marlins and Angels. Winds are out to right at 16 miles per hour. It's close to being a crosswind, so check back on that later on, but I would be fine giving bats a slight bump tonight. Worth noting, though, again, temperature around 74 in Anaheim, not as hot as it was last week. There is a decent chance of rain in Minneapolis for the Twins and Dodgers. Winds are in from right at 12 miles per hour, and the temperature is 52 degrees. The wind might be blocked by a big parking garage out there, but there's also like this big mezzanine out there, so I wouldn't be shocked if that actually does play a role. I downgrade bats in Minneapolis if that game plays, mostly due to the temperature more so than the wind. In Arizona, first pitch temperature is just 71 degrees for the Diamondbacks and Astros. So it's not a downgrade relative to all parks because it's about the same as them, but it is a downgrade from typical Arizona where it's not as much of an advantage as it usually would be. Finally, it is just 48 degrees in San Francisco for the Giants and Padres, so downgrade hitters there as well. We'll break down the pitching options for today in just one segment. First, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it, you can find us there. While you're there, leave us a rating and review as well. Our PGA podcast for today will be a bit later than usual. We typically record 10 a.m. We're going to do 3 p.m. Eastern today, live on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you're watching YouTube right now, you can see I'm in the FanDuel office in New York. So we're here for some meetings. So Brandon and I in person for the podcast for today for the first time ever. So that should be a lot of fun. 3 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. Hey, sports fans, there is no better time than today to sign up for FanDuel Fantasy. For users who have yet to make a deposit on FanDuel Fantasy, you can deposit today to receive 2 free entries. All you have to do is deposit a minimum of $10 into your FanDuel DFS account, and you will instantly be rewarded with 2 free vouchers. This is a limited time offer, so be sure to deposit now and play for free. Head over to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Yu Darvish is the highest salaried pitcher on FanDuel, checking in at $9,700. We got Dakota Hudson at $9,500. Luis Garcia is $86,000. Patrick Sandoval, $84,000. And Yusei Kikuchi is $8,000, rounding out the top group. Now, the top option for me today is Yu Darvish. I want to note, though, that this is a very risky move. And for Darvish, because everyone's risky, the risk here is due to the matchup. He's facing the Giants, and they are a very good offense. They have a 118 WRC plus versus righties since the start of the last year based on their current active roster. They got a lot of power, too. So I don't want to use pitchers facing them. It's a downside. They will strike out, though. They have a 24% strikeout rate versus righties, which is the second highest mark on this slate. And we know Darvish is stretched out because last week in his debut, he went 92 pitches. Now, he did get yanked with a no-hitter, which means that 92 was probably his absolute limit. I'm projecting Darvish for 95 for tonight. He wasn't overly sharp in that first game. He walked 4 guys compared to just 3 strikeouts across 6 innings. So that could be a cause for concern. So there are kind of 1.5 red flags with Darvish. That's another reason why you could pivot off of him if you get the sense that Darvish will be prohibitively popular for tonight. I just think that he is the highest upside option of this group, which is always going to be my preference for DFS, gunning for upside. So I do see reasons to pivot, and I will not talk you out of it, but straight up, just looking at things straight up, Yu Darvish is the top option for today. So he is number one, but you do have leeway to pivot. There are some interesting pivot options available as well. One of those could be Patrick Sandoval. The problem is Sandoval is also risky, just for different reasons. I do still like him against the Marlins. And the reason for concern with Sandoval is health, because he was originally scheduled to start last Friday, and that got pushed back to today. He said it was due to arm fatigue. That's not what you want to hear ever, especially right at the start of the season. Sandoval was stretched out back in the spring. He went 77 pitches in his final spring outing, so I am still projecting him at 85 for right now. I just think it's worth noting that there is cause for concern with the arm fatigue, and it does prevent me from, going cuckoo for him on this slate. The good thing is that the rest of the profile is very good for Sandoval. He is facing the Marlins. They are a high strikeout team against lefties with a 24% strikeout rate and just a 173 ISO. Sandoval had a 27% strikeout rate over his final 8 starts last year when he was throwing his slider more. And he also did keep batted balls in check. So Sandoval is a very good pitcher. And if not for the fatigue issues, I would be very much in, and want to be high on him, probably higher than Darvish for today. But I just can't. I got to proceed with some caution here because of the arm issues. So Sandoval is still a good option, one I will turn to, but just know, as with Darvish, there are some very real risks here. Now, with so much risk on this slate, we can afford to take swipes on assumptions, try to take some swings on buy low spots. And I think there are a couple spots worth doing so. We'll talk about one in things to watch. My favorite guy for tonight doing this is Jesus Luzardo. Luzardo is facing the Angels, which is not a bad matchup for a lefty, just a 169 ISO against lefties. The 22% strikeout rate is about average. So those two aspects are acceptable. And Luzardo is kind of fun. He did show promise last year after the trade. He started to increase his curveball usage over his final 9 starts last year. It is classified as a slider on pitch info, but kind of looks more like a curveball, so we'll go with that. But across those 9 starts with more breaking pitches, he had a 23% strikeout rate. That gets your curiosity, but he threw that pitch a ton this spring. He threw it 48% of the time in a start back on March 27th, and he had good velocity, and he got a good number of whiffs. That gets your attention. He is $7,100, and it's a slate fully devoid of safety, so you might as well shoot for the fences and see what happens. I think Luzardo counts for a quote-unquote shoot for the fences type of play. I'll be happy to use him when lowering my exposure to Darvish and Sandoval. So to me, I think that Luzardo worth a swipe for today based on the promise he showed this spring, based on his prospect pedigree, and based on what he showed at the end of last year as well. So pitching for today, very tough, a lot of risk, and you got to be okay with that. But I do think there are some good options despite that. So our stacking goes, it's probably boring to say to stack the Astros against Madison Bumgarner, but sometimes boring is boring for a reason, and it's because it's right. So the Astros are the top stack of the day for me. Bumgarner let up just 1 run in his first start this year, and, that's fine, but that's deceptive. It was because he walked 4 batters in the 3rd inning and then got yanked. That was not a good showing. And that came against the Padres, which are a much worse offense than the Astros against lefties. The Astros, a 190 ISO against lefties, plenty of fly balls, minimal strikeouts. That should give Bumgarner some pretty big issues here. His strikeout rate is down to 18% over his past 9 starts with his curve usage down. His fly ball rate allowed is 45%. I don't think that specific formula, low strikeout, high fly ball rate, will work against this offense. So I will be heavy on the Astros here. If you go with someone like Luzardo, you can afford to be a bit chalkier with your stack. So I do think the Astros work out pretty well here. The good thing with the Astros is that we can stack them without it being fully boring. They got a lot of young guys, or at least fresh faces, who are legit options for DFS. The last time they faced a lefty, they had both Jose Siri and Jeremy Pena in the top of the order. Siri's not young, but he's fun because he's new. He had 8th the first time they faced a lefty. I'd expect him down there probably again. Pena has hit 7th and 2nd. I think they're both very fun. Siri is $2,000, Pena $2,300. I'm expecting probably a 7-8 type spot in the batting order for those two, but keeps things fresh, saves salary, allows you to get to the studs in this team. So the Astros can still be fun despite the fact we've been stacking them for what feels like forever at this point. Now, back in opening day, one of the teams I did not stack was the Cardinals, and that burned me because they were kind of like the key to that slate. I'm not going to make that mistake again here on Tuesday. I think they're a pretty good option against Daniel Lynch. The big thing is that Lynch is a lefty, and the Cardinals torch lefties. They have a 127 WRC plus against lefties by their non-pitchers since the start of last year. And Lynch really did struggle in his first season with the Royals. He can get whiffs. I know that for sure. But he had just an 18% strikeout rate last year. It did go up to 20% over his final 10 starts when he was throwing more sliders. But even a 20% mark, if we assume he sticks at that going forward, is not great. He had some rough batted ball data too, with a 43% hard hit rate allowed and a 40% fly ball rate. And those are numbers we can stack against, especially with a lineup this powerful like St. Louis's. Weather's good in St. Louis, 73 degrees for today. So this is a stack that really checks all the boxes for me. And the fun thing is, you really can't go wrong with whoever you use on this team. Because the Cardinals right now have 13 non-pitchers on their active roster. Only 5 of those 13 have an ISO lower than 200 against lefties since the start of last year. The guys above that, 8 guys: Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado, Albert Pujols, yes, Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, Tommy Edman, Harrison Bader, and Lars Nootbaar in a very small sample. And when you've got 8 legitimate options, plus a couple others who are close and are still good options too, that's phenomenal. So the Cardinals are high salaried. You're not getting a discount here by any means, but if you use Luzardo, you've got the coin to get there for sure. So I think that they're very worth it, and the Cardinals and the Astros make a very fun, high upside top 2 stacks for today in DFS. Our third stack is malleable depending on what happens with the Orioles starter for today. So we'll check back on that and things to watch. But for right now, let's go with the Rangers. Over in Texas today, you got the Rockies and Rangers, and I think you can stack either side here with the Rockies facing Martin Perez, Rangers getting Chad Kuhl. We're going to focus on the Rangers here, but the Rockies are in play as well against Perez. Kuhl is back in the rotation after losing his spot last year. He made 14 starts before he got that demotion, and his skill interactive ERA was 5.10, strikeout rate of 20% with a 12% walk rate, and you can see why he lost the spot in the rotation. He's getting another shot this year, but it's mostly because the team doesn't have a lot of great options. We saw Kuhl really struggle during the spring, so it's likely best for us to expect him to struggle once again. If this were 2021, I might not care because the Rangers offense was so bad, but they're a lot better now with Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Mitch Garver all in town. So they're not an elite offense, but they are palatable. They are competent, and that is a big improvement from where they were last year. So there's enough here where I am okay stacking them against Kuhl in this spot. Most of Kuhl's struggles last year came with lefties, so that's where I would lean hardest with this Rangers team. Obviously, that pushes you towards Corey Seager, but I also do like Brad Miller here. Miller's batting leadoff for the Rangers typically. He has a 250 ISO against righties since the start of last year. A lot of hard contact, plenty of fly balls. I remember last year at the Phillies, whenever he was in the lineup, he was like an auto start versus a righty. He's $2,700. So I would say Seager and Miller are your 2 building blocks for this team in what should be a pretty fun spot as they face Kuhl for today. Let's finish up here with things to watch. Going back to one more pitcher, I do want to eventually take some swipes at Alex Cobb. He pitched well at the end of last year, and apparently he was hitting 97 on the gun this spring. Just not sure if now is the time to do so just yet. I've got Cobb projected for 70 pitches. Not convinced he's stretched out just yet. So I do want to see what he's got. I'm just not sure if I'll get there today due to pitch count. So it's kind of like an evaluation start. You watch Cobb, see what he does, and decide going forward if he's someone you want to use for DFS. I mentioned before the Orioles, not sure who they will start for today. There's a pretty good chance that we'll want to stack the Brewers against them. The 2 most likely options for the Orioles seem to be Spencer Watkins and Alexander Wells. Wells really struggled last year, let up a lot of hard contact. And the same thing with Watkins, who actually had worse results than Watkins to go with it, or than Wells. So the Brewers pretty likely to wind up as one of the top 3 stacks. I just can't quite put them there right now, not knowing whom they're going to face. So Astros, awesome. Cardinals, awesome. Brewers, likely awesome. And then most likely the Rangers in that fourth spot. One more team I'd consider for stacking, or two more teams I'd consider, would be the Twins and Dodgers. The problem is that weather is legitimately bad for hitting. The Twins face Andrew Heaney. The Dodgers face Chris Archer, and both those guys give up a ton of hard contact. So both offenses, very good offenses too, we just have to downgrade them due to the weather. And when I've got great options like the Astros, Cardinals, and likely Brewers, it's hard for me to justify going with a team in less than ideal weather. So I will be okay stacking them, but I want to make sure I am ranking them below the Brewers, below the Astros, and below the Cardinals, because those are more pristine situations, whereas this one is a very good matchup, but not the best weather. Let's finish up here with some home run calls for today. The boring one will be Tyler O'Neill. His numbers versus lefties are stupid. He's facing Lynch, who lets up a lot of fly balls and a lot of hard contact. I think you just don't overthink this one. You lock him in, go from there. So the boring home run call will be Tyler O'Neill. The fun one, you could push back on this being fun because he hits leadoff, but Brad Miller will be my fun one because, he's a lower salary guy, $2,700. Not a guy you think of as like the superstar within this Rangers team right now. So Tyler O'Neill and Brad Miller, the official home run calls for today. Hopefully I don't jinx him as much as I jinxed Danny Jansen by making him the home run call yesterday before he was placed on the IL. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. But as mentioned, we have PGA coming up later on today, 3 p.m. on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So go, make sure you're subscribed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. If you've got questions for me, I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your DFS lineups for tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to get you set for Wednesday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.